Ulysses, Chapter 17, Part 2, by James Joyce. Which domestic problem, as much as, if not more than, any other, frequently engaged his mind? What to do with our wives? What had been his hypothetical singular solutions? Parlour games, dominoes, halma, tiddlywinks, spillikins, cup and ball, nap, spoil five, bezique, 25, beggar my neighbour, draughts, chess, or backgammon, embroidery, darning or knitting for the police-aided clothing society, musical duets, mandolin and guitar, piano and flute, guitar and piano, legal scrivenery or envelope addressing, bi-weekly visits to variety entertainments, commercial activity as pleasantly commanding and pleasingly obeyed mistress proprietress in a cool dairy shop or warm cigar divan, the clandestine satisfaction of erotic irritation in masculine brothels, state-inspected and medically controlled, social visits at regular infrequent prevented intervals, and with regular frequent preventative superintendents, to and from female acquaintances of recognized respectability in the vicinity. Courses of evening instruction, specially designed to render liberal instruction agreeable. What instances of deficient mental development in his wife inclined him in favor of the last-mentioned ninth solution? In disoccupied moments, she had more than once covered a sheet of paper with signs and hieroglyphics, which she stated were Greek and Irish and Hebrew characters. She had interrogated constantly at varying intervals as to the correct method of writing the capital initial of the name of a city in Canada, Quebec. She understood little of political complications, internal or balance of power, external. In calculating the addenda of bills, she frequently had recourse to digital aid. After completion of laconic epistolary compositions, she abandoned the implement of calligraphy in the encaustic pigment. Exposed to the corrosive actions of copperas, green vitriol, and nut gall, unusual polysyllables of foreign origin, she interpreted phonetically, or by false analogy, or by both. Metempsychosis, met him pike hoses, alias a mendacious person mentioned in sacred scripture. What compensated in the false balance of her intelligence for these and such deficiencies of judgment regarding persons, places, and things? The false apparent parallelism of all perpendicular arms of all balances proved true by construction. The counterbalance of her proficiency of judgment regarding one person proved true by experiment. Had he attempted to remedy this state of comparative ignorance? Variously, by leaving in a conspicuous place a certain book open at a certain page, by assuming in her, when alluding explanatorially, latent knowledge, by open ridicule in her presence of some absent other's ignorant lapse. With what success had he attempted direct instruction? She followed not all, a part of the whole, gave attention with interest, comprehended with surprise, with care repeated, with greater difficulty remembered, forgot with ease, with misgiving re-remembered, re-repeated with error. What system had proved more effective? Indirect suggestion implicating self-interest. Example: she disliked umbrella with rain. He liked women with umbrella. She disliked new hat with rain. He liked woman with new hat. He bought new hat with rain. She carried umbrella with new hat. Accepting the analogy implied in his guest's parable, which examples of post-exilic eminence did he adduce? 3 seekers of the pure truth: Moses of Egypt, Moses Maimonides, author of More Nebuchim, Guide of the Perplexed, and Moses Mendelssohn, of such eminence that Moses of Egypt to Moses Mendelssohn there arose none like Moses Maimonides. What statement was made under correction by Bloom concerning a 4th seeker of pure truth, by name Aristotle, mentioned with permission by Stephen? That the seeker mentioned had been a pupil of a rabbinical philosopher, name uncertain. Were there an apocryphal illustrious sons of the law and children of a selected or rejected race mentioned? Felix Bartholdy Mendelssohn, composer. Baruch Spinoza, philosopher. Mendoza, pugilist. Ferdinand Lassalle, reformer, dualist. What fragments of verse from the ancient Hebrew and ancient Irish languages were cited with modulations of voice and translation of texts by guest to host and by host to guest? By Stephen, Suil, Suil, Suil Arun, Suil, Go, Suisar, Agus, Suil, Go, Queen. Walk, walk, walk your way, walk in safety, walk with care. By Bloom, Kifoloch, Halimen, Raketech, Mibad, Les Amatech. Thy temple amid thy hair is as a slice of pomegranate. How is a glyphic comparison of the phonic symbols of both languages made in substantiation of the oral comparison? By juxtaposition. On the penultimate blank page of a book of inferior literary style, entitled Sweets of Sin, produced by Bloom and so manipulated that its front cover came in contact with the surface of the table. With a pencil, supplied by Stephen wrote the Irish characters for G, A, D, M, simple and modified, and Bloom, in turn, wrote the Hebrew characters, Gimel, Aleph, Daleth, and, in the absence of Mem, a substituted Kof, explaining their arithmetical values as ordinal and cardinal numbers. Fidelis 3, 1, 4, and 100. Was the knowledge possessed by both of each of these languages, the extinct and the revived, theoretical or practical? Theoretical, being confined to certain grammatical rules of accidence and syntax, and practically excluding vocabulary. What points of contact existed between these languages and between the peoples who spoke them? The presence of guttural sounds, diacritic aspirations, epenthetic and servile letters in both languages, their antiquity, both having been taught on the plain of Shinar 242 years after the deluge in the seminary instituted by Phineas Farce, descendant of Noah, progenitor of Israel, and ascendant of Heber and Heraman, progenitors of Ireland. Their archaeological, genealogical, hagiographical, exegetical, homilectic, toponomastic, historical, and religious literatures, comprising the works of rabbis and Chaldees, Torah, Talmud, Mishnah, and Gemara, Masor, Pentateuch, Book of the Dun Cow, Book of Ballymote, Garland of Howth, Book of Kells, their dispersal, persecution, survival, and revival, the isolation of their synagogical and ecclesiastical rites in Ghetto, St. Mary's Abbey, and Mass House, Adam and Eve's Tavern, the prescription of their national costumes in penal laws and Jewish dress acts, the restoration in Hannah David of Zion, and the possibility of Irish political autonomy or devolution. What anthem did Bloom chant partially in anticipation of that multiple, ethnically irreducible consummation? Kolod Balja Pinama Nefesh Jehudi Homija. Why was the chant arrested at the conclusion of this first distich? In consequence of defective mnemotechnic. How did the chanter compensate for this deficiency? By a paraphrastic version of the general text. In what common study did their mutual reflections merge? The increasing simplification traceable from the Egyptian epigraphic hieroglyphs to the Greek and Roman alphabets, and the anticipation of modern stenography and telegraphic code in the cuneiform inscription Semitic, and the virgular quinquagostic Ogham writing Celtic. Did the guest comply with his host's request? Doubly, by pending his signature in Irish and Roman characters. What was Stephen's auditive sensation? He heard in a profound ancient male unfamiliar melody the accumulation of the past. What was Bloom's visual sensation? He saw in a quick young male familiar form the predestination of a future. What were Stevens and Bloom's quasi-simultaneous volitional quasi-sensations of concealed identities? Visually, Stevens, the traditional figure of hypostasis depicted by Johannes Damascenus, Lentulus Romanus, and Epiphanius Monachus, as leucodermic, sesquipedalian with wine-dark hair. Auditively, Bloom's, the traditional accent of the ecstasy of catastrophe. What future careers had been possible for Bloom in the past, and with what exemplars? In the Church, Roman, Anglican, or Nonconformist exemplars, the very Reverend John Conmey, S.J., the Reverend T. Salmon, D.D., Provost of Trinity College, Dr. Alexander J. Dowie. At the bar, English or Irish, exemplars Seymour Bush, K.C., Rufus Isaacs, K.C. On the stage, modern or Shakespearean, exemplars Charles Wyndham, high comedian, Osmond Tearle, exponent of Shakespeare. Did the host encourage his guests to chant in a modulated voice a strange legend on an allied theme? Reassuringly, their place where none could hear them talk being secluded, reassured the decocted beverages allowing for sub-solid residual sediment of a mechanical mixture, water plus sugar plus cream plus cocoa, having been consumed. Recite the first major part of this chanted legend. Little Harry Hughes and his schoolfellows all went out for to play ball, and the very first ball little Harry Hughes played, he drove it o'er the Jew's garden wall, and the very second ball little Harry Hughes played, he broke the Jew's windows all. How did the son of Rudolph receive this first part? With unmixed feeling. Smiling, a Jew, he heard with pleasure, and saw the unbroken kitchen window. Recite the second part, minor, of the legend. Then out there came the Jew's daughter, and she all dressed in green. Come back, you pretty little boy, and play your ball again. I can't come back, and I won't come back without my schoolfellows all, for if my master he did hear, he'd make it a sorry ball. She took him by the lily-white hand, and led him along the ball, until she led him to a room where none could hear him call. She took a penknife out of her pocket and cut off his little head, and now he'll play his ball no more, for he lies among the dead. How did the father of Millicent receive this second part? With mixed feelings. Unsmiling, he heard and saw with wonder a Jew's daughter, all dressed in green. Condense Stevens' commentary. One of all, the least of all, is the victim, predestined. Once by inadvertence, twice by design, he challenges his destiny. It comes when he is abandoned and challenges him reluctant, and, as an apparition of hope and youth, holds him unresisting. It leads him to a strange habitation, to a secret infidel apartment, and there, implacable, immolates him, consenting. Why was the host, victim predestined, sad? He wished that a tale of a deed should be told of a deed not by him, should by him not be told. Why was the host reluctant, unresisting still? In accordance with the law of the conservation of energy. Why was the host, secret infidel, silent? He weighed the possible evidences for and against ritual murder, the incitations of the hierarchy, the superstition of the populace, the propagation of rumor and continued fraction of veridicity, the envy of opulence, the influence of retaliation, the sporadic reappearance of atavistic delinquency, the mitigating circumstances of fanaticism, hypnotic suggestion, and somnambulism. From which, if any, of these mental or physical disorders was he not totally immune? From hypnotic suggestion, once waking, he had not recognized his sleeping apartment. More than once waking, he had been, for an indefinite time, incapable of moving or uttering sounds. From somnambulism, once sleeping, his body had risen, crouched and crawled in the direction of a heatless fire, and having attained its destination, there curled unheeded in night attire had lain, sleeping. Had this latter or any cognate phenomenon declared itself in any member of his family? Twice, in Hull Street and in Ontario Terrace, his daughter Millicent, Millie, at the ages of 6 and 8 years, had uttered in sleep an exclamation of terror, and had replied to the interrogations of two figures in night attire with a vacant, mute expression. What other infantile memories had he of her? 15 June 1889, a querulous newborn female infant crying to cause and lessen congestion. A child named Padney Socks. She shook with shocks her money box, counted his 3 free money penny buttons, 1, 2, 3. A doll, a boy, a sailor she cast away. Blonde, born of too dark, she had blonde ancestry. Remote, a violation. Herr Hauptmann Hanau. Austrian Army. Proximate, a hallucination. Lieutenant Mulvey, British Navy. What endemic characteristics were present? Conversely, the nasal and frontal formation was derived in a direct line of lineage which, though interrupted, would continue at distant intervals to more distant intervals to its most distant intervals. What memories had he of her adolescence? She relegated her hoop and skipping rope to a recess. On the Duke's lawn, entreated by an English visitor, she declined to permit him to make and take away her photographic image. Objection not stated. On the South Circular Road, in the company of Elsa Potter, followed by an individual of sinister aspect, she went halfway down Stamer Street and turned abruptly back, reason of change not stated. On the vigil of 15th anniversary of her birth, she wrote a letter from Mullingar County, Westmeath, making a brief allusion to a local student, faculty and year not stated. Did that first division, portending a second division, afflict him? Less than he had imagined, more than he had hoped. What second departure was contemporaneously perceived by him similarly, if different? A temporary departure of his cat. Why similarly? Why differently? Similarly, because actuated by a secret purpose, the quest of a new male, Mullingar student, or of a healing herb, valerian. Differently, because of different possible returns to the inhabitants or to the habitation. In other respects, were their differences similar? In passivity, in economy, in the instinct of tradition, in unexpectedness. As, inasmuch as leaning, she sustained her blonde hair for him to ribbon it for her. Cf. neck-arching cat. Moreover, on the free surface of the lake in Stephen's Green, amid inverted reflections of trees, her uncommented spit, describing concentric circles of waterings, indicated by the constancy of its permanence the locus of a somnolent prostrate fish. Cf. mouse-watching cat. Again, in order to remember the date, combatants, issue, and consequences of a famous military engagement, she pulled a plait of her hair, cf. ear-washing cat. Furthermore, silly Millie, she dreamed of having had an unspoken, unremembered conversation with a horse, whose name had been Joseph, to which she had offered a tumbler full of lemonade, which he had appeared to have accepted, cf. hearth-dreaming cat. Hence, in passivity, in economy, in the instinct of tradition, in unexpectedness, their differences were similar. In what way had he utilized gifts? 1, an owl, 2, a clock, given as matrimonial auguries to interest and to instruct her? As object lessons to explain 1, the nature and habits of oviparous animals, the possibility of aerial flight, certain abnormalities of vision, the secular process of embalmization. 2, the principle of the pendulum, exemplified in bob, wheel gear, and regulator, the translation in terms of human or social regulation of the various positions of clockwise movable indicators on an unmoving dial, the exactitude of the recurrence per hour of an instant in each hour, when the longer and the shorter indicator were at the same angle of inclination. Vid licet, 5 and 5/11 minutes past each hour per hour in arithmetical progression. In what manners did she reciprocate? She remembered on the 27th anniversary of his birth, she presented to him a breakfast mustache cup of imitation Crown Derby porcelain ware. She provided at quarter day or thereabouts, if or when purchases had been made by him not for her, she showed herself attentive to his necessities, anticipating his desires. She admired a natural phenomenon having been explained by him to her. She expressed the immediate desire to possess, without gradual acquisition, a fraction of his science, the moiety, the quarter, 1,000th part. What proposal did Bloom, diambulist, father of Millie, somnambulist, make to Stephen, noctambulist? To pass in repose the hours intervening between Thursday proper and Friday normal, on an extemporized cubicle in the apartment immediately above the kitchen and immediately adjacent to the sleeping apartment of his host and hostess. What various advantages would or might have resulted from a prolongation of such an extemporization? For the guest, security of domicile and seclusion of study. For the host, rejuvenation of intelligence, vicarious satisfaction. For the hostess, disintegration of obsession, acquisition of correct Italian pronunciation. What might these several provisional contingencies between a guest and a hostess not necessarily preclude or be precluded by a permanent eventuality of reconciliatory union between a schoolfellow and a Jew's daughter? Because the way to daughter led through mother, the way to mother through daughter. To what inconsequent polysyllabic question of his host did the guest return a monosyllabic negative answer? If he had known the late Mrs. Emily Sinico, accidentally killed at Sydney Parade Railway Station, 14 October 1903. What inchoate corollary statement was consequently suppressed by the host? A statement explanatory of his absence on the occasion of the interment of Mrs. Mary Dedalus, born Gilding, 26 June 1903, vigil of the anniversary of the decease of Rudolph Bloom, born Verag. Was the proposal of asylum accepted? Promptly, inexplicably, with amicability. Gratefully, it was declined. What exchange of money took place between host and guest? The former returned to the latter without interest a sum of money, £1 7 shillings sterling, advanced by the latter to the former. What counter-proposals were alternately advanced, accepted, modified, declined, restated in other terms, re-accepted, ratified, and reconfirmed? To inaugurate a pre-arranged course of Italian instruction, place the residence of the instructed. To inaugurate a course of vocal instruction, place the residence of the instructress. To inaugurate a series of static, semi-static, and peripatetic intellectual dialogues, places the residences of both speakers, if both speakers were resident in the same place. The Ship Hotel and Tavern, 6 Lower Abbey Street, West and East Connery, proprietors. The National Library of Ireland, 10 Kildare Street. The National Maternity Hospital, 29, 30 and 31 Hall Street. A public garden, the vicinity of a place of worship. A conjunction of 2 or more public thoroughfares. The point of bisection of a right line drawn between their residences, if both speakers were resident in different places. What rendered problematic for Bloom the realization of these mutually self-excluding propositions? The irreparability of the past. Once, at a performance of Albert Hengler's circus in the Rotunda, Rutland Square, Dublin, an intuitive, party-coloured clown in quest of paternity had penetrated from the ring to a place in the auditorium where Bloom, solitary, was seated, and had publicly declared to an exhilarated audience that he, Bloom, was his, the clown's, papa. The imprevedibility of the future. Once, in the summer of 1898, he, Bloom, had marked a florin with 3 notches on the milled edge and tendered it in payment of an account due to and received by J. and T. Davy, family grocers, 1 Charlemont Mall, Grand Canal, for circulation on the waters of civic finance, for possible circuitous or direct return. Was the clown Bloom's son? No. Had Bloom's coin returned? Never. Why would a recurrent frustration the more depress him? Because, at the critical turning point of human existence, he desired to amend many social conditions, the product of an inequality and avarice and international animosity. He believed then that human life was infinitely perfectible, eliminating these conditions. There remain the generic conditions imposed by natural as distinct from human law, as integral parts of the human whole, the necessity of destruction to procure alimentary sustenance, the painful character of the ultimate functions of separate existence, the agonies of birth and death, the monotonous menstruation of simian and particularly human females, extending from the age of puberty to menopause, inevitable accidents at sea, in mines and factories, certain very painful maladies, and the resultant surgical procedures, innate lunacy and congenital criminality, decimating epidemics, catastrophic cataclysms, which made terror the basis of human mentality, seismic upheavals, the epicenters of which are located in densely populated regions, the fact of vital growth through convulsions of metamorphosis, from infancy through maturity to decay. Why did he desist from speculation? Because it was a task for superior intelligence to substitute other more acceptable phenomena in the place of less acceptable phenomena to be removed. Did Stephen participate in his dejection? He affirmed his significance as a conscious, rational animal proceeding syllogistically from the known to the unknown, and a conscious, rational reagent between a micro and a macrocosm, ineluctably constructed upon the incertitude of the void. Was this affirmation apprehended by Bloom? Not verbally, substantially. What comforted his misapprehension? That as a competent, keyless citizen, he had proceeded energetically from the unknown to the known through the incertitude of the void. In what order of precedence and with what attendant ceremony was the exodus from the house of bondage to the wilderness of inhabitation effected? Lighted candle and stick borne by Bloom, diaconal hat on ash plant borne by Stephen. With what intonation secreto of what commemorative psalm? The 113th modus peregrinus in exitu Israel de Egypto, domus Jacob de populo barbaro. What did each do at the door of egress? Bloom set the candlestick on the floor. Stephen put the hat on his head. For what creation was the door of egress a door of ingress? For a cat. What spectacle confronted them when they, first the host, then the guest, emerged silently doubly dark from obscurity by a passage from the rear of the house into the penumbra of the garden? The heaven tree of stars hung with humid night blue fruit. With what meditations did Bloom accompany his demonstration to his companion of various constellations? Meditations of evolution increasingly vaster, of the moon invisible in incipient lunation, approaching perigee, of the infinite, litigious, scintillating, uncondensed Milky Way, discernible by daylight by an observer, placed at the lower end of a cylindrical vertical shaft 5,000 feet deep, sunk from the surface toward the center of the earth, of Sirius, Alpha and Canis Major, 10 light years, 57 trillion miles, distant and in volume 900 times the dimension of our planet, of Arcturus, of the precession of equinoxes, of Orion with belt and sextuple sun Theta and nebula, in which 100 of our solar systems could be contained, of moribund and of nascent new stars such as Nova in 1901, of our system plunging towards the constellation of Hercules, of the parallax or parallactic drift of so-called fixed stars, in reality ever-moving wanderers from immeasurably remote eons to infinitely remote futures, in comparison with which the years 70 of allotted human life formed a parenthesis of infinitesimal brevity. Were there obverse meditations of involution increasingly less vast? Of the eons of geological periods recorded in the stratifications of the earth, of the myriad minute entomological organic existences concealed in cavities of the earth, beneath removable stones, in hives and mounds of microbes, germs, bacteria, bacilli, spermatozoa, of the incalculable trillions of billions of millions of imperceptible molecules contained by cohesion of molecular affinity in a single pinhead, of the universe of human serum, constellated with red and white bodies, themselves universes of void space, constellated with other bodies, each in continuity, its universe of divisible component bodies, of which each was again divisible, in divisions of redivisible component bodies, dividends and divisors ever diminishing without actual division, till, if the progress were carried far enough, naught, nowhere, was never reached. Why did he not elaborate these calculations to a more precise result? Because some years previously, in 1886, when occupied with the problem of the quadrature of the circle, he had learned of the existence of a number computed to a relative degree of accuracy to be of such magnitude, and of so many places, e.g. the ninth power of the ninth power of 9, that the result having been obtained, 33 closely printed volumes of 1,000 pages each of innumerable quires and reams of India paper would have to be requisitioned in order to contain the complete tale of its printed integers of units, tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions, the nucleus of the nebula of every digit of every series, containing succinctly the potentiality of being raised to the utmost kinetic elaboration of any power of any of its powers. Did he find the problems of the inhabitability of the planets and their satellites by a race given in species, and of possible social and moral redemption of said race by a redeemer, easier of solution? Of a different order of difficulty, conscious that the human organism, normally capable of sustaining an atmospheric pressure of 19 tons when elevated to a considerable altitude, in the terrestrial atmosphere suffered with arithmetical progression of intensity according as the line of demarcation between troposphere and stratosphere was approximated, from nasal hemorrhage, impeded respiration, and vertigo. When proposing this problem for solution, he had conjectured, as a working hypothesis, which could not be proved impossible, that a more adaptable and differently anatomically constructed race of beings might subsist otherwise under Martian, Mercurial, Venereal, Jovian, Saturnian, Neptunian, or Uranian sufficient and equivalent conditions, though an apogean humanity of beings created in varying forms with finite differences resulting similar to the whole and to one another would probably there as here remain inalterably and inalienably attached to vanities of vanities, and to all that is vanity. And the problem of possible redemption, the minor, was proved by the major. Which various features of the constellations were in turn considered? The various colors significant of various degrees of vitality, white, yellow, crimson, vermilion, cinnabar, their degrees of brilliancy, their magnitudes revealed up to and including the seventh, their positions, the Wagoner's star, Walsingham Way, the chariot of David, the annular cinctures of Saturn, the condensation of spiral nebulae into suns, the interdependent gyrations of double suns, the independent synchronous discoveries of Galileo, Simon Marius, Piazzi, Leverrier, Herschel, Gall, the systemizations attempted by Bode and Kepler of cubes of distances and squares of times of revolution, the almost infinite compressibility of hirsute comets and their vast elliptical, egressive, and re-entrant orbits, from perihelion to aphelion, the sidereal origin of meteoric stones, the Libyan floods on Mars, about the period of the birth of the younger astroscopist, the annual recurrence of meteoric showers about the period of the feast of St. Lawrence, martyr, 10th of August, the monthly recurrence known as the new moon with the old moon in her arms, the posited influence of celestial on human bodies, The appearance of a star of first magnitude of exceeding brilliancy dominating by night and day, a new luminous sun generated by the collision and the amalgamation in incandescence of two non-luminous exons. About the period of the birth of William Shakespeare over Delta, in the recumbent, never-setting constellation of Cassiopeia, and of a star and magnitude of similar origin but of lesser brilliancy, which had appeared in and disappeared from the constellation of Corona Septentrionalius. About the period of the birth of Leopold Bloom, and of other stars of presumably similar origin, which had effectively or presumably appeared in and disappeared from the constellation of Andromeda about the period of the birth of Stephen Dedalus, and in from the constellation of Auriga some years after the birth and death of Rudolf Bloom Jr., and in and from other constellations some years before or after the birth or death of other persons, the attendant phenomena of eclipses, solar and lunar, from immersion to immersion, abatement of wind, transit of shadow, taciturnity of winged creatures, emergence of nocturnal or crepuscular animals, persistence of infernal light, obscurity or terrestrial waters, pallor of human beings. His, Bloom's, logical conclusion, having weighed the matter and allowing for possible error, that it was not a heaven tree, not a heaven grot, not a heaven beast, not a heaven man, that it was a utopia, there being no known method from the known to the unknown, an infinity renderable equally finite by the supposititious apposition of one or more bodies equally of the same and of different magnitudes, a mobility of illusory forms immobilized in space, remobilized in air, a past which possibly had ceased to exist as a present before its probable spectators had entered actual present existence. Was he more convinced of the aesthetic value of the spectacle? Indubitably, in consequence of the reiterated examples of poets, in the delirium of the frenzy of attachment, or in the abasement of rejection, invoking ardent sympathetic constellations, or the frigidity of the satellite of their planet. Did he then accept as an article of belief the theory of astrological influences upon sublunary disasters? It seemed to him as possible of proof as of computation, and the nomenclature employed in its selenographical charts as attributable to verifiable intuition as to fallacious analogy, the lake of dreams, the sea of rains, the gulf of dews, the ocean of fecundity. What special affinities appear to him to exist between the moon and woman? Her antiquity in preceding and surviving successive tellurian generations, her nocturnal predominance, her satellite dependence, her luminary reflection, her constancy under all her phases, rising and setting by her appointed times, waxing and waning, the forced invariability of her aspect, her indeterminate response to inaffirmative interrogation, her potency over effluent and refluent waters, her power to enamour, to mortify, to invest with beauty, to render insane, to incite to and aid delinquency, the tranquil inscrutability of her visage, the terribility of her isolated, dominant, implacable, resplendent propinquity, her omens of tempest and of calm, the stimulation of her light, her motion and her presence, the admonition of her craters, her arid seas, her silence, her splendor, when visible, her attraction, when invisible. What visible luminous sign attracted Bloom's, who attracted Stephen's gaze? In the second-story rear of his Bloom's house, the light of a paraffin oil lamp with oblique shade projected on a screen of roller blind, supplied by Frank O'Hara, window blind, curtain pole and revolving shutter manufacturer, 16 Augier Street. How did he elucidate the mystery of an invisible attractive person, his wife Marion Molly Bloom, denoted by a visible splendid sign, a lamp? With indirect and direct verbal allusions or affirmations, with subdued affection and admiration, with description, with impediment, with suggestion. Both then were silent, each contemplating the other in both mirrors of the reciprocal flesh of their his not this fellow faces. Were they indefinitely inactive? At Stephen's suggestion, at Bloom's instigation, both, first Stephen, then Bloom, in penumbra urinated, their sides contiguous, their organs of micturition reciprocally rendered invisible by manual circumposition, their gazes, first Bloom's, then Stephen's, elevated to the projected luminous and semi-luminous shadow. Similarly, the trajectories of their first sequent, then simultaneous urinations were dissimilar. Bloom's longer, less eruent, in the incomplete form of the bifurcated penultimate alphabetical letter, who, in his ultimate year at high school, 1880, had been capable of attaining the point of greatest altitude against the whole concurrent strength of the institution, 210 scholars. Stephen's higher, more sibilant, who in the ultimate hours of the previous day had augmented by diuretic consumption and insistent vesical pressure. What different problems presented themselves to each concerning the invisible, audible, collateral organ of the other? To Bloom, the problems of irritability, tumescence, rigidity, reactivity, dimension, sanitariness, pelosity. To Stephen, the problem of the sacerdotal integrity of Jesus circumcised, 1 January, a holiday of obligation to hear Mass and abstain from unnecessary servile work, and the problem as to whether the divine prepuce, the carnal bridle ring of the Holy Roman Catholic Apostolic Church, conserved in Calcutta, were deserving of simple hyperduly, or of the fourth degree of latria, according to the abscission of such divine excrescences as hair and toenails. What celestial sign was by both simultaneously observed? A star, precipitated with great apparent velocity across the firmament from Vega in the Lyre, above the zenith, beyond the star group of the Tress of Berenice, towards the zodiacal sign of Leo. How did the centripetal remainer afford egress to the centrifugal departer? By inserting the barrel of an originated male key in the hole of an unstable female lock, obtaining a purchase on the bow of the key, and turning its wards from right to left, withdrawing a bolt from its stable, pulling inward spasmodically an obsolescent unhinged door, and revealing an aperture for free egress and free ingress. How did they take leave, one of the other, in separation? Standing perpendicular at the same door and on different sides of its base, the lines of their valedictory arms meeting at any point and forming any angle less than the sum of two right angles. What sound accompanied the union of their tangent, the disunion of their respectively centrifugal and centripetal hands? The sound of the peal of the hour of the night by the chime of the bells in the church of St. George. What echoes of that sound were by both and each heard? By Stephen, Liliata rutilantium turma succurrumdet, iubilantium te virginium, chorus excipiat. By Bloom, hi-ho, 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 hi-ho. What were the several members of the company which, with Bloom that day at the bidding of that peal, had travelled from Sandymount in the south to Glasnevin in the north? Martin Cunningham, in bed. Jack Power, in bed. Simon Dedalus, in bed. Ned Lambert, in bed. Tom Kernan in bed, Joe Hines in bed, John Henry Menton in bed, Bernard Corrigan in bed, Patsy Dignam in bed, Paddy Dignam in the grave. Alone, what did Bloom hear? The double reverberation of retreating feet on the heaven-born earth, the double vibration of a Jew's harp in the resonant lane. Alone, what did Bloom feel? The cold of interstellar space, thousands of degrees below freezing point, or the absolute zero of Fahrenheit, centigrade, or enamour, the incipient intimations of proximate dawn. Of what did bell chime and hand touch and footstep and lone chill remind him? Of companions now in various manners in different places defunct, Percy Apjohn, killed in action, Modder River, Philip Gilligan, Phthisis, Jervis Street Hospital, Matthew F. Kane, accidental drowning, Dublin Bay, Philip Moisel, Paimia, Hedesbury Street, Michael Harth, Phthisis, Mater Misericordiae Hospital, Patrick Dignam, apoplexy, Sandymount. What prospect of what phenomena inclined him to remain? The disparition of 3 final stars, the diffusion of daybreak, the apparition of a new solar disk. Had he ever been a spectator of those phenomena? Once, in 1887, after a protracted performance of charades in the house of Luke Doyle, Kimmage, he had awaited with patience the apparition of the diurnal phenomenon, seated on a wall, his gaze turned in the direction of Mizrach, the east. He remembered the initial paraphenomena. More active air, a matutinal distant cock, ecclesiastical clocks at various points, Avon music, the isolated tread of an early wayfarer, the visible diffusion of the light of an invisible luminous body, the first golden limb of the resurgent sun perceptible low on the horizon. Did he remain? With deep inspiration he returned, retraversing the garden, re-entering the passage, reclosing the door. With brief suspiration he reassumed the candle, reascended the stairs, reapproached the door of the front room, hold floor, and re-entered. What suddenly arrested his ingress? The right temporal lobe of the hollow sphere of his cranium came into contact with a solid timber angle where, an infinitesimal but sensible fraction of a second later, a painful sensation was located in consequence of the antecedent sensations transmitted and registered. Describe the alterations effected in the disposition of the articles of furniture. A sofa upholstered in prune plush had been translocated from opposite the door to the ingleside near the compactly furled Union Jack, an alteration which he had frequently intended to execute. The blue and white checker inlaid majolica-topped table had been placed opposite the door in the place vacated by the prune plush sofa. The walnut sideboard, a projecting angle of which had momentarily arrested his ingress, had been moved from its position beside the door to a more advantageous but more perilous position in front of the door. 2 chairs had been moved from right and left of the ingleside to the position originally occupied by the blue and white checker inlaid majolica-topped table. Describe them. 1. A squat stuffed easy chair with stout arms extended and back slanted to the rear, which repelled in recoil, had then upturned an irregular fringe of a rectangular rug and now displayed on its amply upholstered seat a centralized diffusing and diminishing discoloration. The other, a slender splay-foot chair of glossy cane curves, placed directly opposite the former, its frame from top to seat and from seat to base being varnished dark brown, its seat being a bright circle of white-plated rush. What significances attached to these 2 chairs? Significances of similitude, of posture, of symbolism, of circumstantial evidence, of testimonial supermanence. What occupied the position originally occupied by the sideboard? A vertical piano, Cadby, with exposed keyboard, its closed coffin supporting a pair of long ladies' yellow gloves, and an emerald ashtray containing 4 consumed matches, a partly consumed cigarette, and 2 discolored ends of cigarettes. Its music crest supporting the music in the key of G, natural, for voice and piano, of Love's Old Sweet Song, words by G. Clifton Bingham, composed by J. L. Malloy, sung by Madame Antoinette Sterling, open at the last page with the final indications of ad libitum, forte, pedal, animato, sustained pedal, ritirando, close. With what sensations did Bloom contemplate in rotation these objects? With strain, elevating a candlestick; with pain, feeling on his right temple a contused tumescence; with attention, focusing his gaze on a large, dull, passive, and slender, bright, active; with solicitation, bending and downturning the upturned rug fringe; with amusement, remembering Dr. Malachi Mulligan's scheme of colour, containing the gradation of green; with pleasure, repeating the words and antecedent act, and perceiving through various channels of internal sensibility the consequent and concomitant tepid, pleasant diffusion of gradual discoloration. His next proceeding? From an open box on the majolica top table he extracted a black diminutive cone, 1 inch in height, placed it on its circular base on a small tin plate, placed his candlestick on the right corner of the mantelpiece, produced from his waistcoat a folded paper of prospectus, illustrated, entitled Agendath Netaim, unfolded the same, examined it superficially, rolled it into a thin cylinder, ignited it in the candle flame, applied it when ignited to the apex of the cone till the latter reached the stage of rutulence, placed the cylinder in the basin of the candlestick, disposing its unconsumed part in such a manner as to facilitate total combustion. What followed this operation? The truncated conical crater summit of the diminutive volcano emitted a vertical and serpentine fume redolent of aromatic oriental incense. What homothetic objects other than the candlestick stood on the mantelpiece? A timepiece of striated Connemara marble stopped at the hour of 4:46 a.m. on the 21st March 1896, matrimonial gift of Matthew Dillon. A dwarf tree of glacial arborescence under transparent bell shade, matrimonial gift of Luke and Caroline Doyle. An embalmed owl, matrimonial gift of Alderman John Hooper. What interchanges of looks took place between these 3 objects and Bloom? In the mirror of the gilt-bordered pier glass, the undecorated back of the dwarf tree regarded the upright back of the embalmed owl. Before the mirror, the matrimonial gift of Alderman John Hooper, with a clear, melancholy, wise, bright, motionless, compassionate gaze, regarded Bloom, while Bloom, with obscure, tranquil, profound, motionless, compassionated gaze, regarded the matrimonial gift of Luke and Caroline Doyle. What composite asymmetrical image in the mirror then attracted his attention? The image of a solitary, ipso-relative, mutable, alio-relative man. Why solitary, ipso-relative? Brothers and sisters had he none, yet that man's father was his grandfather's son. Why mutable, alio-relative? From infancy to maturity he had resembled his maternal procreatrix. From maturity to senility, he would increasingly resemble his paternal procreator. What final visual impression was communicated to him by the mirror? The optical reflection of several inverted volumes, improperly arranged and not in the order of their common letters, with scintillating titles on the 2 bookshelves opposite. Catalogue these books. Tom's Dublin Post Office Directory, 1886, Dennis Florence McCarthy's Poetical Works, Copper Beechleaf Bookmark at page 5, Shakespeare's Works, Dark Crimson Morocco, Gold Tooled, The Useful Ready Reckoner, brown cloth, The Secret History of the Court of Charles II, red cloth, tooled binding, The Child's Guide, blue cloth, The Beauties of Killarney, wrappers, When We Were Boys by William O'Brien, N.P., green cloth, slightly faded, envelope bookmark at page 217. Thoughts from Spinoza, maroon leather. The Story of the Heavens by Sir Robert Ball, blue cloth. Ellis's 3 Trips to Madagascar, brown cloth, title obliterated. The Stark Munro Letters by A. Conan Doyle, property of the City of Dublin Public School, 106 Capel Street, Lent 21, May, Whitsun Eve, 1904, due 4 June 1904, 13 days overdue, black cloth binding bearing white letter number ticket. Voyages in China by Viator, recovered with brown paper, red ink title. Philosophy of the Talmud, sewn pamphlet. Lockhart's Life of Napoleon, cover wanting, marginal annotations, minimizing victories, aggrandizing defeats of the protagonist. Soll und Haben by Gustav Freytag, blackboards, Gothic characters, cigarette coupon bookmark at page 24. Hosier's History of the Russo-Turkish War, brown cloth, 2 volumes with gummed label, Garrison Library, Governor's Parade, Gibraltar, on verso of cover. Lawrence Bloomfield in Ireland by William Allingham, 2nd edition, green cloth, gilt trefoil, design, previous owner's name on recto of flyleaf erased. A Handbook of Astronomy, cover, brown leather, detached, 5 plates, antique letterpress long primer. Author's footnotes non-pareil, marginal clues, brevier, captions, small pica. The Hidden Life of Christ, blackboards. In the Track of the Sun, yellow cloth, title page missing, recurrent title, Intestation. Physical Strength and How to Obtain It by Eugene Sandow, red cloth. Short but yet plain elements of geometry, written in French by F. Ignat. Parties and rendered into English by John Harris, D.D. London. Printed for R. Knaplock at the Bishop's Head, MDCCX1, with dedicatory epistle to his worthy friend Charles Cox, Esquire, Member of Parliament for the Borough of Southwark, and having ink calligraph statement on the flyleaf certifying that the book was property of Michael Gallagher, dated the 10th day of May, 1822, and requesting the person who should find it, if the book be lost or go astray, to restore it to Michael Gallagher, carpenter, Durfrey Gate, Enniscorthy, County Wicklow, the finest place in the world. What reflections occupied his mind during the process of reversion of the inverted volumes? The necessity of order, a place for everything and everything in its place, the deficient appreciation of literature possessed by females, the incongruity of an apple inconiated in a tumbler and of an umbrella inclined in a close stool, the insecurity of hiding any secret document behind, beneath, or between the pages of a book. Which volume was the largest in bulk? Hosier's History of the Russo-Turkish War. What, among other data, did the 2nd volume of the work in question contain? The name of a decisive battle, forgotten, frequently remembered by a decisive officer, Major Brian Cooper Tweedy, remembered. Why, firstly and secondly, did he not consult the work in question? Firstly, in order to exercise mnemotechnic. Secondly, because after an interval of amnesia, when seated at the central table about to consult the work in question, he remembered by mnemotechnic the name of the military engagement, Plevna. What caused him consolation in his seating posture? The candor, nudity, pose, tranquility, youth, grace, sex, counsel of a statue erect in the center of the table, an image of Narcissus purchased by auction from P.A. Wren, 9 Bachelor's Walk. What caused him irritation in his sitting posture? Inhibitory pressure of collar, size 17. And waistcoat, 5 buttons. 2 articles of clothing superfluous in the costume of mature males and inelastic to alterations of mass by expansion. How was the irritation allayed? He removed his collar, with contained black tie and collapsible stud from his neck, to a position on the left of the table. He unbuttoned successively in reverse direction waistcoat, trousers, shirt, and vest, along the medial line of irregular, increspated black hairs, extending in triangular convergence from the pelvic basin over the circumference of the abdomen and umbilical fossa, along the medial line of nodes to the intersection of the 6th pectoral vertebrae, thence produced both ways at right angles and terminating in circles described about 2 equidistant points, right and left, on the summits of the mammary prominences. He unbraced successively each of 6 minus 1 braced trouser buttons, arranged in pairs, of which 1 incomplete. What involuntary actions followed? He compressed between 2 fingers the flesh circumjacent to a cicatrice in the left infracostal region, below the diaphragm, resulting from a sting inflicted 2 weeks and 3 days previously, 23 May 1904, by a bee. He scratched imprecisely with his right hand, though insensible of prurition, various points and surfaces of his partly exposed, wholly abluted skin. He inserted his left hand into the left lower pocket of his waistcoat and extracted and replaced a silver coin, 1 shilling, placed there presumably on the occasion 17 October 1903 of the interment of Mrs. Emily Sinico, Sydney Parade. Compile the budget for 16 June 1906. 1 pork kidney, 1 copy Freeman's Journal, 1 bath and gratification, tram fare, 1 in memoriam Patrick Dignam, 2 Banbury cakes, 1 lunch, 1 renewal fee for book, 1 packet note paper and envelopes, 1 dinner and gratification, 1 postal order and stamp, tram fare, 1 pig's foot, 1 sheep's trotter, 1 cake fries plain chocolate, 1 square soda bread, 1 coffee and bun, loan Stephen Dedalus refunded, balance £2, 19 shillings, credit, cash in hand, commission, Freeman's Journal, loan £2, 19 shillings. Did the process of divestiture continue? Sensible of a benignant persistent ache in his foot soles, he extended his foot to one side and observed the creases, protuberances, and salient points caused by foot pressure in the course of walking repeatedly in several different directions. Then, inclined, he disnoted the lace knots, unhooked and loosened the laces, took off each of his 2 boots for the second time, detached the partially moistened right sock, through the forepart of which the nail of his great toe had again effracted, raised his right foot, and having unhooked a purple elastic sock suspender, took off his right sock, placed his unclothed right foot on the margin of the seat of his chair, picked at and gently lacerated the protruding part of the great toenail, raised the part lacerated to his nostrils, and inhaled the odor of the quick, then, with satisfaction, threw away the lacerated ungual fragment. Why with satisfaction? Because the odor inhaled corresponded to other odors inhaled of other ungual fragments, picked and lacerated by Master Bloom, pupil of Mrs. Ellis's juvenile school, patiently each night in the act of brief genuflection and nocturnal prayer and ambitious meditation. In what ultimate ambition had all concurrent and consecutive ambitions now coalesced? Not to inherit by right of primogeniture Gavelkind or Borough English, or possessed in perpetuity an extensive demesne of a sufficient number of acres, roods, and perches, statute land measure, valuation £42, of grazing tuberry, surrounding a baronial hall with gate lodge and carriage drive, nor, on the other hand, a terrace house or semi-detached villa, described as rus in urb or qui sisana, but to purchase by private treaty in fee simple a thatched bungalow-shaped two-story dwelling house of southerly aspect, surmounted by vein and lightning conductor, connected with the earth with porch covered by parasitic plants, ivy or Virginia creeper, hall door, olive green with smart carriage finish and neat door brasses, stucco front with gilt tracery at eaves and gable, rising, if possible, upon a gentle eminence from agreeable prospect from balcony, with stone pillar parapet over unoccupied and unoccupiable interjacent pastures, and standing in 5 or 6 acres of its own ground at such a distance from the nearest public thoroughfare as to render its house lights visible at night above and through, a quick-set hornbeam hedge of topiary cutting, situate at a given point not less than 1 statute mile from the periphery of the metropolis, within a time limit of not more than 15 minutes from tram or train line, e.g. Dundrum South or Sutton North, both localities equally reported by trial to resemble the terrestrial poles in being favorable climates for physical subjects. The premises to be held under fee-farm grant, leased 999 years, the messuage to consist of 1 drawing-room with bay window, 2 lancets, thermometer affixed, 1 sitting-room, 4 bedrooms, 2 servants' rooms, tiled kitchen with close range and scullery, lounge hall fitted with linen wall presses, fumed oak sectional bookcase containing the Encyclopedia Britannica, a New Century Dictionary, transverse obsolete medieval and oriental weapons, dinner gong, alabaster lamp, bowl pendant, vulcanite automatic telephone receiver with adjacent directory, hand-tufted Axminster carpet with cream ground and trellis border, loo table with pillar and claw legs, hearth with massive fire brasses, and ormolu mantel chronometer clock, guaranteed timekeeper with cathedral chime, barometer and hydrographic chart, comfortable lounge settees and corner fitments, upholstered in ruby plush with good springing and sunk center, 3-banner Japanese screen and cuspidors, club style, rich wine-colored leather, gloss renewable with a minimum of flavor by use of linseed oil and vinegar, and pyramidically prismatic central chandelier luster, bent wood perch with finger-tame parrot, expurgated language, embossed mural paper at 10 pence per dozen, with transverse swags of carmine floral design and top-crowned frieze staircase, 3 continuous flights at successive right angles of varnished clear-grained oak, treads and risers, newel, balusters, and handrail with stepped-up panel dado, dressed with camphorated wax. Bathroom, hot and cold supply, reclining and shower, water closet on mezzanine provided with opaque single-pane oblong window, tip-up seat, bracket lamp, brass tie rod and brace, armrest, footstool, and artistic oleograph on interface of door, ditto plain. Servants' apartments with separate sanitary and hygienic necessities for cook, general, and between maid, salary rising by biennial unearned increments of £2 with comprehensive fidelity insurance, annual bonus £1, and retiring allowance based on the 65 system after 30 years' service, pantry, buttery, larder, refrigerator, out offices, coal and wood cellarage with wine bins, steel and sparkling vintages for distinguished guests if entertained to dinner, evening dress, carbon monoxide gas supply throughout. What additional attractions might the grounds contain? As addenda, a tennis and 5 courts, a shrubbery, a glass summer house with tropical palms, equipped in the best botanical manner, a rockery with water spray, a beehive arranged on humane principles, oval flower beds in rectangular grass plots, set with eccentric ellipses of scarlet and chrome tulips, blue scillas, crocuses, polyanthus, sweet william, sweet pea, lily of the valley, bulbs obtainable from Sir James W. Mackey, limited wholesale and retail seed and bulb merchants and nurserymen, agents for chemical manures, 23 Sackville Street, Upper. An orchard, kitchen garden and vinery, protected against illegal trespassers by glass-topped mural enclosures, a lumber shed with padlock for various inventoried implements. As eel traps, lobster pots, fishing rods, hatchet, steelyard, grindstone, clod crusher, swathe turner, carriage sack, telescope ladder, 10-tooth rake, washing clogs, hay tedder, tumbling rake, bill hook, paint pot, brush, hoe, and so on. What improvements might be subsequently introduced? A rabbitry in Fowl Run, a dovecote, a botanical conservatory, 2 hammocks, ladies' and gentlemen's, a sundial shaded and sheltered by laburnum or lilac trees, an exotically harmonically accorded Japanese tinkle gate bell, affixed to the left lateral gate post, a capacious water butt, a lawn mower with side delivering grass box, a lawn sprinkler with hydraulic hose. What facilities of transit were desirable? When city-bound, frequent connection by train or tram from their respective intermediate station or terminal. When country-bound, velocipedes, a chainless free-wheel roadster cycle with side basket car attached, or draught conveyance, a donkey with wicker trap, or smart phaeton with good working, solid ungular cob, roan gelding. What might be the name of this erigible or erected residence? Bloom Cottage, St. Leopold's, Flowerville. Could Bloom of 7 Eccles Street foresee Bloom of Flowerville? In loose all-wool garments with Harris tweed cap, price 8 and 6, and useful garden boots with elastic gussets and watering can, planting aligned young fert trees, syringing, pruning, staking, sowing hayseed, trundling a weed-laden wheelbarrow without excessive fatigue at sunset, amid the scent of new-mown hay, ameliorating the soil, multiplying wisdom, achieving longevity. What syllabus of intellectual pursuits was simultaneously possible? Snapshot photography, comparative study of religions, folklore relative to various amatory and superstitious practices, contemplation of the celestial constellations. What lighter recreations? Outdoor, garden and field work, cycling on level macadamized causeways, ascents of moderately high hills, natation in secluded fresh water, and unmolested river boating in secure wherry, or light coracle with kedge anchor, or on reaches free from weirs and rapids, period of estivation. Vespertinal perambulation or equestrian circumprocession with inspection of sterile landscape and contrastingly agreeable cottagers' fires of smoking peat turfs, period of hibernation. Indoor, discussion in tepid security of unsolved historical and criminal problems. Lecture of unexpurgated exotic erotic masterpieces. House carpentry with toolbox containing hammer, awl, nail, screws, tin tacks, gimlet, tweezers, bullnose plane, and turn screw. Might he become a gentleman farmer of field produce and livestock? Not impossibly, with 1 or 2 stripper cows, 1 pike of upland hay, and requisite farming implements, e.g., an end-to-end churn, a turnip pulper, etc. What would be his civic functions and social status among the county families and landed gentry? Arranged successively in ascending powers of hierarchical order, that of gardener, groundsman, cultivator, breeder, and at the zenith of his career, resident magistrate or justice of the peace, with the family crest and coat of arms, an appropriate classical motto, Semper Paratus. Duly recorded in the court directory, Bloom, Leopold, P.M.P., P.C., K.P., LLD, honoris causa, Bloomville Dungeon, and mentioned in court and fashionable intelligence Mr. and Mrs. Leopold Bloom having left Kingston for England. What course of action did he outline for himself in such capacity? A course that lay between undue clemency and excessive rigor, the dispensation in a heterogeneous society of arbitrary classes incessantly rearranged in terms of greater and lesser social inequality, of unbiased, homogeneous, indisputable justice, tempered with mitigants of the widest possible latitude, but exactable to the uttermost farthing, with confiscation of estate, real and personal, to the crown. Loyal to the highest constituted power in the land, actuated by an innate love of rectitude, his aims would be the strict maintenance of public order, the repression of many abuses, though not of all simultaneously, every measure of reform or retrenchment being a preliminary solution to be contained by fluxion in the final solution. The upholding of the letter of the law, common, statute, and law merchant, against all traverses in coven and trespassers acting in contravention of bylaws and regulations, all resuscitators by trespass and petty larceny of kindlings, of Venville rights, obsolete by desuetude, all orotund instigators of international persecution, all perpetuators of international animosities, all menial molesters of domestic conviviality, all recalcitrant violators of domestic connubiality. Proof that he had loved rectitude from his earliest youth. To Master Percy Apjohn at high school in 1880, he had divulged his disbelief in the tenets of the Irish Protestant Church, to which his father, Rudolf Virag, later Rudolf Bloom, had been converted from the Israelitic faith and communion in 1865 by the Society for Promoting Christianity Among the Jews, subsequently abjured by him in favor of Roman Catholicism at the epoch of, and with a view to his matrimony in 1888. To Daniel Maygraine and Francis Wade in 1882, during a juvenile friendship terminated by the premature emigration of the former, he had advocated during nocturnal perambulations the political theory of colonial, e.g. Canadian expansion, and the evolutionary theories of Charles Darwin, expounded in The Descent of Man and the Origin of Species. In 1885, he had publicly expressed his adherence to the collective and national economic program advocated by James Fenton Lalor, John Fisher Murray, John Mitchell, J.F.X. O'Brien, and others, the agrarian policy of Michael Davitt, the constitutional agitation of Charles Stewart Parnell, MP for Cork City, the program of peace, retrenchment, and reform of William Ewart Gladstone, NP for Midlothian NB, and, in support of his political convictions, had climbed up into a secure position amid the ramifications of a tree on Northumberland Road to see the entrance to, February 1888, into the capital of a demonstrative torchlight procession of 20,000 torch-bearers divided into 120 trade corporations, bearing 2,000 torches in escort of the Marquess of Ripon and honest John Morley. How much, and how did he propose to pay for this country residence? As per prospectus of the industrious foreign, acclimatized, nationalized, friendly, state-aided building society, incorporated 1874, a maximum of £60 per annum, being 1/6 of an assured income derived from gilt-edged securities, representing at 5% simple interest on capital of £1,200, estimated price at 20 years' purchase, of which 1/3 to be paid on acquisition, and the balance in the form of annual rent, viz. £800 plus 2.5% interest on the same, repayable quarterly in equal annual installments until extinction by amortization of loan, advance for purchase within a period of 20 years, amounting to an annual rental of £64, head rent included, the title deeds to remain in possession of the lender or lenders, with a saving clause envisaging forced sale, foreclosure, and mutual compensation in the event of protracted failure to pay the terms assigned. Otherwise, the messuage to become the absolute property of the tenant-occupier upon expiry of the period of years stipulated. What rapid but insecure means to opulence might facilitate immediate purchase? A private wireless telegraph which would transmit by dot and dash system the result of a national equine handicap, flat or steeplechase of 1 or more miles and furlongs won by an outsider at the odds of 50 to 1 at 3 hour 8 p.m. at Ascot, Greenwich time. The message being received and available for betting purposes in Dublin at 2:59 p.m. Dunsink time. The unexpected discovery of an object of great monetary value, precious stone, valuable adhesive or impressed postage stamp, 7-shilling mauve imperforate Hamburg 1866, 4-pence rose blue paper perforate Great Britain 1855, 1 franc stone official rouletted, diagonal surcharge Luxembourg 1878, antique dynastical ring, unique relic, in unusual repositories or by unusual means, from the air, dropped by an eagle, in flight, by fire, amid the carbonized remains of an incendiated edifice, in the sea, amid flotsam, jetsam, lagoon, and derelict, on earth, in the gizzard of a comestible fowl. A Spanish prisoner's donation of a distant treasure of valuables or specie or bullion lodged with a solvent banking corporation 100 years previously at 5% compound interest of the collective worth of £5 million sterling, a contract with an inconsiderate contractee for the delivery of 32 consignments of some given initial rate of 1/4 to be increased constantly to the geometrical progression of 2, 1/4, 1/2, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16 to 32 terms. A prepared scheme based on a study of the laws of probability to break the bank at Monte Carlo. A solution of the secular problem of the quadrature of the circle. Government premium, £1 million sterling. Was vast wealth acquirable through industrial channels? The reclamation of Dunham's of waste arnery soil proposed in the prospectus of Agendath Netium, Bleibstrasse, Berlin, W15, by the cultivation of orange plantations and melon fields and reforestation, the utilization of waste paper, fells of sewer rodents, human excrement possessing chemical properties, in view of the vast production of the first, vast number of the second, and immense quantity of the third, every normal human being of average vitality and appetite, producing annually, cancelling byproducts of water, a sum of 80 pounds mixed animal and vegetable diet, to be multiplied by 4,386,035, the total population of Ireland, according to the census returns of 1901. Were there schemes of wider scope? A scheme to be formulated and submitted for approval to the harbour commissioners for the exploitation of white coal hydraulic power obtained by hydroelectric plant at peak of tide at Dublin Bar, or at head of water at Pulafuca or Powerscourt, or catchment basins of main steams for the economic production of 500,000 WHP of electricity. A scheme to enclose the peninsular delta of the North Bull of Dollymount and erect on the space of the foreland, used for golf links and rifle ranges, an asphalted esplanade with casinos, booths, shooting galleries, hotels, boarding houses, reading rooms, establishments for mixed bathing. A scheme for the use of dog vans and goat vans for the delivery of early morning milk. A scheme for the development of Irish tourist trade in and around Dublin by means of petrol-propelled riverboats plying in the fluvial local railways and pleasure steamers for coastwise navigation. 10 shillings per person per day, guide, trilingual included. A scheme for the repristination of passenger and good traffics over Irish waterways when freed from weed beds. A scheme to connect by tram line the Cattle Market, North Circular Road, and Prussia Street with the Quays, Sheriff Street Lower and East Wall, parallel with the Link Line railway laid, in conjunction with the Great Southern and Western Railway line, between the Cattle Park, Liffey Junction, and terminus of Midland Great Western Railway, 43 to 45 North Wall, in proximity to the terminal stations or Dublin branches of Great Central Railway, Midland Railway of England, City of Dublin, Steam Packet Company, Lancashire Yorkshire Railway Company, Dublin and Glasgow Steam Packet Company, Glasgow, Dublin and Londonderry Steam Packet Company, Laird Line, British and Irish Steam Packet Company, Dublin and Morecambe Steamers, London and North Western Railway Company, Dublin Port and docks, board landing sheds, and transit sheds of Palgrave, Murphy and Company, steamship owners, agents for steamers from Mediterranean, Spain, Portugal, France, Belgium, and Holland, and for Liverpool Underwriters Association. The cost of acquired rolling stock for animal transport and of additional mileage operated by the Dublin United Tramway Company Limited to be covered by grazier's fees. Positing what protasis would the contraction for such several schemes become a natural and necessary apodosis? Given a guarantee equal to the sum sought, the support by deed of gift and transfer vouchers during donor's lifetime, or by bequest, after donor's painless extinction, of eminent financiers, Blum, Pasha, Rothschild, Guggenheim, Hirsch, Montefiore, Morgan, Rockefeller, possessing fortunes in six figures or mastering a successful life, and joining capital with opportunity the thing required was done. What eventuality would render him independent of such wealth? The independent discovery of a gold seam of inexhaustible ore. For what reason did he meditate on schemes so difficult of realization? It was one of his axioms that similar meditations, or the automatic relation to himself of a narrative concerning himself, or tranquil recollection of the past, when practiced habitually before retiring for the night, alleviated fatigue and produced as a result sound repose and renovated vitality. His justifications? As a physicist, he had learned that of the 70 years of complete human life, at least 2/7, viz. 20 years, are passed in sleep. As a philosopher, he knew that at the termination of any allotted life, only an infinitesimal part of any person's desires has been realized. As a physiologist, he believed in the artificial placation of malignant agencies, chiefly operative during somnolence. What did he fear? The committal of homicide or suicide during sleep by an aberration of the light of reason. The incommensurable categorical intelligence situated in the cerebral convolutions. What were habitually his final meditations? Of some, one sole unique advertisement to cause passers to stop and wonder. A poster novelty with all extraneous accretions excluded, reduced to its simplest and most efficient terms, not exceeding the span of casual vision and congruous with the velocity of modern life. What did the first drawer unlocked contain? A Vere Foster's handwriting copybook, property of Millie Millicent Bloom, certain pages of which bore diagram drawings marked Popley, which showed a large globular head with 5 hairs erect, 2 eyes in profile, the trunk full front with 3 large buttons, 1 triangular foot, 2 fading photographs of Queen Alexandra of England and of Maud Branscombe, actress and professional beauty, a Yuletide card bearing on it a pictorial representation of a parasitic plant, the legend Mizpah, the date Christmas 1892, the name of the senders from Mr. and Mrs. Comerford, the versicle, "May this Yuletide bring to thee joy and peace and welcome glee." A butt of red, partly liquefied sealing wax, obtained from the store's department of Messrs. Helly's Limited, 899091 Dame Street. A box containing the remainder of a gross gilt J. Pennibs, obtained from same department of same firm. An old sand glass containing sand which rolled. A sealed prophecy, never unsealed, written by Leopold Bloom in 1886, concerning the consequences of the passing into law of William Ewart Gladstone's Home Rule Bill of 1886, never passed into law. A bazaar ticket, number 2004, of S. Kevin's Charity Fair, 100 prizes, an infantile epistle dated small, M. Monday, reading, capital P, Popley, comma, capital H, How are you of interrogation, capital I am very well, full stop, new paragraph signature with flourishes, capital M, Millie, no stop. A cameo brooch, property of Ellen Bloom, born Higgins, deceased. A cameo scarf pin, property of Rudolph Bloom, born Virag, deceased. 3 typewritten letters, addressee Henry Flower, in care of P.O. Westland Row, addresser Martha Clifford, in care of P.O. Dolphin's Barn. The transliterated name and address of the addresser of the 3 letters in reversed alphabetic boustrophodonic punctuated quadrilinear cryptogram. Vowels suppressed. N, IGS, WI, UU, OXW, OKS, MH, YIM. A press cutting from an English weekly periodical, Modern Society. Subject, corporal chastisement in girls' schools. A pink ribbon, which had festooned an Easter egg in the year 1899. 2 partly uncoiled rubber preservatives with reserve pockets, purchased by post, Box 32, P.O., Charing Cross, London, W.C. 1 pack, 1 dozen cream-laid envelopes and faint ruled notepaper, watermarked, now reduced by 3. Some assorted Austrian-Hungarian coins, 2 coupons of the Royal and Privileged Hungarian Lottery, a low-power magnifying glass, 2 erotic photo cards showing a buccal coition between nude señorita, rear presentation, superior position, and nude torero, forward presentation, inferior position. B, anal violation by male, religious, fully clothed, eyes abject, of female religious, partly closed, eyes direct, purchased by post from Box 32, P.O., Charing Cross, London, W.C. A press cutting of recipe for renovation of old tan boots. 1 adhesive stamp. Lavender of the reign of Queen Victoria. A chart of the measurements of Leopold Bloom compiled before, during, and after 2 months' consecutive use of Sandow's Whiteley's pulley exerciser. Men's 15, athletes 20. Viz chest 20 inches and 29.5 inches, biceps 9 inches and 10 inches, forearms 8.5 inches and 9 inches in thigh, 10 inches and 12 inches calf, inches, 12 inches. 1 prospectus of the Wonder Worker, the world's greatest remedy for rectal complaints, direct from Wonder Worker, Coventry House, South Place, London, EC, addressed erroneously to Mrs. L. Bloom, with brief accompanying note commencing erroneously, Dear Madam, quote the textual terms in which the prospectus claimed advantages for this thaumaturgic remedy. It heals and soothes while you sleep in case of trouble in breaking wind, assists nature in the most formidable way, ensuring instant relief in discharge of gases, keeping parts clean and free, natural action, an initial outlay of 7/6, making a new man of you and life worth living. Ladies find Wonder Worker especially useful, a pleasant surprise when they note delightful result like a cool drink of fresh spring water on a sultry summer's day. Recommended to your lady and gentleman friends. Lasts a lifetime. Insert long round end. Wonder Worker. Were there testimonials? Numerous. From clergyman, British naval officer, well-known author, city man, hospital nurse, lady, mother of 5, and absent-minded beggar. How did the absent-minded beggar's concluding testimonial conclude? What a pity the government did not supply our men with wonder workers during the South African campaign. What a relief it would have been. What object did Bloom add to this collection of objects? A 4th typewritten letter received by Henry Flower. Let HFBLB from Martha Clifford. Find MC. What pleasant reflection accompanied this action? The reflection that, apart from the letter in question, his magnetic face, form, and address had been favorably received during the course of the preceding day by a wife, Mrs. Josephine Breen, born Josie Powell, a nurse, Miss Callan, Christian name unknown, a maid, Gertrude, Gertie, family name unknown. What possibility suggested itself? The possibility of exercising virile power of fascination in the not immediate future after an expensive repast in a private apartment in the company of an elegant courtesan of corporal beauty, moderately mercenary, variously instructed, a lady by origin. What did the second drawer contain? Documents, the birth certificate of Leopold Paula Bloom, an endowment assurance policy of £500 in the Scottish Widows Assurance Society, intestated Millicent Millie Bloom, coming into force at 25 years, as with profit policy of £430, £462 10 and 0, and £500 at 60 years or death, 65 years or death and death, respectively, or with profit policy paid up of £299 10 and 0, together with cash payment of £133 10 and 0 at option. A bank passbook issued by the Ulster Bank, College Green Branch, showing statement of AC for half year 31 December 1903. Balance in depositor's favour, £18 4 and 6, £18 14 shillings 6 pence sterling. Net personalty, certificate of possession, £900. Canadian 4% inscribed, government stock, free of stamp duty, dockets of the Catholic cemeteries, Glasnevin Committee, relative to a grave plot purchased, a local press cutting concerning change of name by deed poll. Quote the textual terms of this notice. 1. I, Rudolph Virag, now resident at number 52 Clanbrassil Street, Dublin, formerly of Zombadely in the Kingdom of Hungary, hereby give notice that I have assumed and intend henceforth upon all occasions and at all times to be known by the name of Rudolph Bloom. What other objects relative to Rudolph Bloom, born Virag, were in the second drawer? An indistinct daguerreotype of Rudolf Virag and his father Leopold Virag, executed in the year 1852 in the portrait atelier of their respectively first and second cousin Stefan Virag, of Székesfehérvár, Hungary. An ancient Haggadah book, in which a pair of horn-rimmed convex spectacles inserted marked the passage of Thanksgiving in the ritual prayers for Passover. A photocard of the Queen's Hotel Ennis proprietor, Rudolph Bloom. An envelope addressed to my dear son, Leopold. What fractions of phrases did the lecture of those 5 whole words evoke? Tomorrow will be a week that I received. It is no use, Leopold, to be with your dear mother. That is not more to stand to her. All for me is out. Be kind, Athos, Leopold, my dear son, always. Of me, das Hers, Gott, dein. What reminiscences of a human subject suffering from progressive melancholia did these objects evoke in Bloom? An old man, widower, unkempt of hair, in bed with head covered, sighing, an infirm dog, Athos, aconite, resorted to by increasing doses of grains and scruples of a palliative of recrudescent neuralgia, the face and death of a septuagenarian, suicide by poison. Why did Bloom experience a sentiment of remorse? Because in immature impatience he had treated with disrespect certain beliefs and practices, as the prohibition of the use of flesh, meat, and milk at one meal, the hebdomadary symposium of incoordinately abstract, preferredly concrete, mercantile, coex-religionist ex-compatriots, the circumcision of male infants, the supernatural character of Judaic scripture, the ineffability of tetragrammaton, the sanctity of the Sabbath. How did these beliefs and practices now appear to him? Not more rational than they had then appeared, not less rational than other beliefs and practices now appeared. What first reminiscence had he of Rudolph Bloom, deceased? Rudolph Bloom, deceased, narrated to his son Leopold Bloom, aged 6, a retrospective arrangement of migrations and settlements in and between Dublin, London, Florence, Milan, Vienna, Budapest, Zombadely, with statements of satisfaction, his grandfather having seen Maria Theresia, Empress of Austria, Queen of Hungary, with commercial advice having taken care of pence, the pounds having taken care of themselves. Leopold Bloom, aged 6, had accompanied these narrations by constant consultation of a geographical map of Europe, political, and by suggestions for the establishment of affiliated business premises in the various centres mentioned. Had time equally but differently obliterated the memory of these migrations in narrator and listener? In narrator, by the axis of years and in consequence of the use of narcotic toxin; in listener, by the axis of years and in consequence of the action of distraction upon vicarious experiences. What idiosyncrasies of the narrator were concomitant products of the amnesia? Occasionally he ate without having previously removed his hat. Occasionally he drank voraciously the juice of gooseberry fool from an inclined plate. Occasionally he removed from his lips the traces of food by means of a lacerated envelope or other accessible fragment of paper. What two phenomena of senescence were more frequent? The myopic digital calculation of coins, eructation consequent upon repletion. What object offered partial consolation for these reminiscences? The endowment policy, the bank passbook, the certificate of the possession of scrip. Reduce Bloom by cross-multiplication of reverses of fortune from which these supports protected him, and by elimination of all positive values to a negligible, negative, irrational, unreal quantity. Successively, in descending halotic order: poverty, that of the outdoor hawker of imitation jewellery; the dun for the recovery of bad and doubtful debts; the poor rate and deputy cess collector; mendicancy, that of the fraudulent bankrupt with negligible assets paid a quarter day in the pound; sandwich man, distributor of throwaways; nocturnal vagrant, insinuating sycophant, maimed sailor, blind stripling; superannuated bailiff's man, mar-feast, lick-plate, spoil-sport, pick-thank, eccentric public laughing-stock, seated on bench of public park under discarded perforated umbrella; destitution, the inmate of old man's house, Royal Hospital; Kilmingham, the inmate of Simpson's Hospital for reduced but respectable men permanently disabled by gout or want of sight; nadir of misery, the aged, impotent, disfranchised, rate-supported, moribund, lunatic pauper. With which attendant indignities? The unsympathetic indifference of previously amiable females, the contempt of muscular males, the acceptance of fragments of bread, the simulated ignorance of casual acquaintances, the latration of illegitimate unlicensed vagabond dogs, the infantile discharge of decomposed vegetal missiles, worth little or nothing, nothing or less than nothing. By what could such a situation be precluded? By decease, change of state; by departure, change of place. Which preferably? The latter, by the line of least resistance. What considerations rendered departure not entirely undesirable? Constant cohabitation impeding mutual toleration of personal defects, the habit of independent purchase increasingly cultivated, the necessity to counteract by impermanent sojourn the permanence of arrest. What considerations rendered departure not irrational? The parties concerned, uniting, had increased and multiplied, which, being done, offspring produced and educed to maturity. The parties, if not disunited, were obliged to reunite for increase and multiplication, which was absurd; to form by reunion the original couple of uniting parties, which was impossible. What considerations rendered departure desirable? The attractive character of certain localities in Ireland and abroad, as represented in general geographical maps of polychrome design, or in special ordnance survey charts by employment of scale, numerals, and hashers. In Ireland, the cliffs of Moher, the windy wilds of Connemara, Lough Neagh, with submerged petrified city; the Giant's Causeway, Fort Camden and Fort Carlisle, the golden vale of Tipperary, the islands of Arran, the pastures of Royal Meath, Bridget's Elm in Kildare, the Queen's Island shipyard in Belfast, the Salmon Leap, the lakes of Killarney. Abroad, Ceylon, with Spice Garden supplying tea to Thomas Kernan, agent for Paulbrook, Robertson and Company, 2 Mincing Lane, London, EC, 5 Dame Street, Dublin. Jerusalem, the holy city, with Mosque of Omar and Gate of Damascus, goal of aspiration. The Straits of Gibraltar, the unique birthplace of Marion Tweedy. The Parthenon, containing statues of nude Grecian divinities. The Wall Street money market, which controlled international finance. The Plaza de Toros a la Línea, Spain, where O'Hara of the Camerons had slain the bull. Niagara, over which no human being had passed with impunity. The land of the Eskimos, eaters of soap. The forbidden country of Tibet, from which no traveller returns. The Bay of Naples, to see which was to die. The Dead Sea. Under what guidance, following what signs? At sea, septentrional, by night, the pole star, located at the point of intersection of the right line from beta to alpha in Ursa Major, produced and divided externally at omega, and the hypotenuse of the right-angled triangle formed by the line alpha omega, so produced, and the line alpha delta of Ursa Major. On land, meridional, a bispherical moon, revealed in imperfect varying phases of lunation through the posterior interstice of imperfectly occluded skirt of a carnose negligent perambulating female, a pillar of the cloud by day. What public advertisement would divulge the occultation of the departed? £5 reward, lost, stolen or strayed from his residence, 7 Eccles Street. Missing gent about 40, answering to the name of Bloom, Leopold Poldy. Height 5 foot 9.5 inches, full build, olive complexion. May have grown since a beard. When last seen was wearing a black suit. Above sum will be paid for information leading to his discovery. What universal binomial denominations would be his as entity and non-entity? Assumed by any or known to none. Every man or no man. What tributes is? Honours and gifts of strangers. The friends of every man. A nymph immortal, beauty, the bride of Norman. Would the departed never nowhere know how reappear? Ever he would wander, self-compelled, to the extreme limit of his cometary orbit, beyond the fixed stars and variable suns and telescopic planets, astronomical waifs and strays, to the extreme boundary of space, passing from land to land, among peoples, amid events. Somewhere imperceptibly he would hear, and somehow reluctantly, sun-compelled, obey the summons of recall. Whence, disappearing from the constellation of the Northern Crown, he would somehow reappear, reborn, above Delta in the constellation of Cassiopeia, and after incalculable eons of peregrination return an estranged avenger, a wreaker of justice on malefactors, a dark crusader, a sleeper awakened, with financial resources by supposition surpassing those of Rothschild or the Silver King. What would render such return irrational? An unsatisfactory equation between an exodus and return in time through reversible space, and an exodus and return in space through irreversible time. What play of forces, inducing inertia, rendered departure undesirable? The lateness of the hour, rendering procrastinatory. The obscurity of the night, rendering invisible. The uncertainty of thoroughfares, rendering perilous. The necessity of repose, obviating movement. The proximity of an occupied bed, obviating research. The anticipation of warmth, human, tempered with coolness, linen, obviating desire and rendering desirable. The statue of Narcissus, sound without echo. Desired desire. What advantages were possessed by an occupied as distinct from an unoccupied bed? The removal of nocturnal solitude, the superior quality of human, mature female to inhuman hot water jar, calefaction, the stimulation of matutinal contact. The economy of mangling, done on the premises in the case of trousers accurately folded and placed lengthwise between the spring mattress, striped, and the woolen mattress, biscuit section. What past consecutive causes before rising pre-apprehended of accumulated fatigue that bloom before rising silently recapitulate? The preparation of breakfast, burnt offering, intestinal congestion, and premeditative defecation, holy of holies, the bath, rite of John, the funeral, rite of Samuel, the advertisement of Alexander Keyes, Urim and Thummim, the unsubstantial lunch, rite of Melchizedek, the visit to museum and National Library, holy place, the book hunt along Bedford Row, Merchant's Arch, Wellington Quay, Simshath Torah, the music in the Ormond Hotel, Shira Shiram, the altercation with the truculent troglodyte in Bernard Kiernan's premises, Holocaust, a blank period of time including a car drive, a visit to a house of mourning, a leave-taking wilderness, the eroticism produced by feminine exhibitionism, rite of Onan, the prolonged delivery of Mrs. Mina Purefoy, heave offering, the visit to the disorderly house of Mrs. Bella Cohan, 82 Tyrone Street, lower and subsequent brawl, and chance medley in Beaver Street, Armageddon, nocturnal perambulation to and from the cabman's shelter, but bridge atonement. What self-imposed enigma did Bloom, about to rise in order to go, so as to conclude, lest he should not conclude involuntarily, apprehend? The cause of a brief, sharp, unforeseen, heard loud lone crack, emitted by the insentient material of a strain-veined timber table. What self-involved enigma did Bloom, risen, going, gathering multicolored, multiform, multitudinous garments, voluntarily, apprehending, not comprehend? Who was Mackintosh? What self-evident enigma, pondered with desultory constancy during 30 years, did Bloom now, having effected natural obscurity by the extinction of artificial light, silently, suddenly comprehend? Where was Moses when the candle went out? What imperfections in a perfect day did Bloom, walking, charged with collected articles of recently disvested male-wearing apparel, silently, successively enumerate? A provisional failure to obtain renewal of an advertisement, to obtain a certain quantity of tea from Thomas Kiernan, agent for Polbrook, Robertson and Company, 5 James Street, Dublin, 2 Mincing Lane, London, EC, to certify the presence or absence of posterior rectal orifice in the case of Hellenic female divinities, to obtain admission, gratuitous or paid, to the performance of Leah, by Mrs. Bandman Palmer at the Gaiety Theatre, 46, 47, 48, 49, South King Street. What impression of an absent face did Bloom, arrested, silently recall? The face of her father, the late Major Brian Cooper Tweedy, Royal Dublin Fusiliers, of Gibraltar and Rehoboth, Dolphin's Barn. What recurrent impressions of the same were possible by hypothesis? Retreating, at the terminus of the Great Northern Railway, Amiens Street, with constant uniform acceleration, along parallel lines meeting at infinity, if produced, along parallel lines reproduced from infinity, with constant uniform retardation, the terminus of the Great Northern Railway, Amiens Street, returning. What miscellaneous effects of female personal wearing apparel were perceived by him? A pair of new inodorous half-silk black ladies' hose, a pair of new violet garters, a pair of outsized ladies' drawers of India mull, cut on generous lines, redolent of apopanax, jessamine, and Muradi's Turkish cigarettes, and containing a long, bright steel safety pin, folded curvilinear, a camisole of batiste with thin lace border, an accordion underskirt of blue silk moirette, all these objects being disposed irregularly on the top of a rectangular trunk, quadruple battened, having capped corners with multicolored labels initialed on its foreside in white lettering BCT, Brian Cooper Tweedy. What impersonal objects were perceived? A commode, one leg fractured, totally covered by square cretonne cutting, apple design, on which rested a lady's black straw hat. Orange keyed ware, bought of Henry Price, basket fancy goods, chinaware and ironmongery manufacturer, 21, 22, 23 Moore Street, disposed irregularly on the washstand and floor, and consisting of basin, soap dish, and brush tray. On the stand, together, pitcher and night article, on the floor, separate. Bloom's axe. He deposited the articles of clothing on a chair, removed his remaining articles of clothing, took from beneath the bolster at the head of the bed a folded long white nightshirt, inserted his head and arms into the proper apertures of the nightshirt, removed a pillow from the head to the foot of the bed, prepared the bed linen accordingly, and entered the bed. How? With circumspection, as invariably when entering an abode, his own or not his own, with solicitude, the snake spiral springs of the mattress being old, the brass quotes and pendant viper radii loose and tremulous under stress and strain, prudently as entering a lair or ambush of lust or adders, lightly, the less to disturb, reverently, the bed of conception and of birth, of consummation of marriage, and of breach of marriage, of sleep, and of death. What did his limbs when gradually extended encounter? New clean bed linen, additional odors, the presence of a human form, female, hers, the imprint of a human form, male, not his, some crumbs, some flakes of potted meat, recooked, which he removed. If he had smiled, why would he have smiled? To reflect that each one who enters imagines himself to be the first to enter, whereas he is always the last term of a preceding series, even if the first term of a succeeding one, each imagining himself to be first, last, only and alone, whereas he is neither first nor last nor only nor alone in a series of originating in and repeated to infinity. What preceding series? Assuming Mulvey to be the first term of his series, Penrose, Bartell D'Arcy, Professor Goodwin, Julius Mastiansky, John Henry Menton, Father Bernard Corrigan, a farmer at the Royal Dublin Society's Horse Show, Maggot O'Reilly, Matthew Dillon, Valentine Blake Dillon, Lord Mayor of Dublin, Christopher Callanan, Lenehan, an Italian organ grinder, an unknown gentleman in the Gaiety Theatre, Benjamin Dollard, Simon Dedalus, Andrew Pisser Burke, Joseph Cuff, Wisdom Haley, Alderman John Hooper, Dr. Francis Brady, Father Sebastian of Mount Argus, a bootblack at the General Post Office, Hugh E. Blazes Boylan, and so each and so on, to no last term. What were his reflections concerning the last member of this series and the late occupant of the bed? Reflections on his vigor, a bounder, corporal proportion, a bill sticker, commercial ability, a bester, impressionability, a boaster. Why for the observer impressionability in addition to vigor, corporal proportion, and commercial ability? Because he had observed with augmenting frequency in the preceding members of the same series the same concupiscence, inflammably transmitted, first with alarm, then with understanding, then with desire, finally with fatigue, with alternating symptoms of epicene comprehension and apprehension. With what antagonistic sentiments were his subsequent reflections affected? Envy, jealousy, abnegation, equanimity, envy of a bodily and mental male organism specially adapted for the superincumbent posture of energetic human copulation, an energetic piston and cylinder movement necessary for the complete satisfaction of a constant but not acute concupiscence resident in a bodily and mental female organism, passive, but not obtuse. Jealousy, because a nature full of volatile and in its free state was alternately the agent and reagent of attraction, because attraction between agents and reagents at all instants varied with inverse proportion of increase and decrease, with incessant circular extension and radial reentrance, because the controlled contemplation of the fluctuation of attraction produced, if desired, a fluctuation of pleasure. Abnegation, in virtue of A, acquaintance, initiated in September 1903 in the establishment of George Messias, merchant tailor and outfitter, 5 Eden Quay. B. Hospitality extended and received in kind, reciprocated and reappropriated in person. C. Comparative youth, subject to impulses of ambition and magnanimity, collegial altruism and amorous egoism. D. Extraracial attraction, intraracial inhibition, supraracial prerogative. E. An imminent provincial musical tour. Common current expenses, net proceeds divided. Equanimity, as natural as any and every natural act of a nature expressed or understood, executed in natured nature by natural creatures in accordance with his, her, and their natured natures, of dissimilar similarity, as not so calamitous as a cataclysmic annihilation of the planet in consequence of a collision with a dark sun, as less reprehensible than theft, highway robbery, cruelty to children and animals, obtaining money under false pretenses, forgery, embezzlement, misappropriation of public money, betrayal of public trust, malingering, mayhem, corruption of minors, criminal libel, blackmail, contempt of court, arson, treason, felony, mutiny on the high seas, trespass, burglary, jailbreaking, practice of unnatural vice, desertion from armed forces in the field, perjury, poaching, usury, intelligence with the king's enemies, impersonation, criminal assault, manslaughter, willful and premeditated murder, as not more abnormal than all other parallel processes of adaptation to altered conditions of existence, resulting in a reciprocal equilibrium between the bodily organism and its attendant circumstances, foods, beverages, acquired habits, indulged inclinations, significant disease, as more than inevitable, irreparable. Why more abnegation than jealousy, less envy than equanimity? From outrage, matrimony, to outrage, adultery, there arose naught but outrage, copulation, yet the matrimonial violator of the matrimonially violated had not been outraged by the adulterous violator of the adulterously violated. What retribution, if any? Assassination? Never. As two wrongs did not make one right. Duel by combat? No. Divorce? Not now. Exposure by mechanical artifice, automatic bed, or individual testimony, concealed ocular witnesses? Not yet. Suit for damages by legal influence or simulation of assault with evidence of injuries sustained, self-inflicted? Not impossibly. Hush money by moral influence? Possibly. If any positively connivance, introduction of emulation, material or prosperous rival agency of publicity, moral, a successful rival agent of intimacy, depreciation, alienation, humiliation, separation, protecting the one separated from the other, protecting the separator from both. By what reflections did he, a conscious reactor against the void of incertitude, justify to himself his sentiments? The preordained frangibility of the hymen, the presupposed intangibility of the thing in itself, the incongruity and disproportion between the self-prolonging tension of the thing proposed to be done and the self-abbreviating relaxation of the thing done, the fallaciously inferred debility of the female, the muscularity of the male, the variations of ethical codes, the natural grammatical transition by inversion, involving no alteration of sense, of an aorist, preterite proposition, parsed as masculine subject, monosyllabic, onomatopoeic, transitive verb with direct feminine object, from the active voice into its correlative, aorist, preterite proposition parsed as a feminine subject, auxiliary verb, and quasi-monosyllabic onomatopoeic past participle, with complementary masculine agent in the passive voice, the continued product of seminators by generation, the continual production of semen by distillation, the futility of triumph or protest or vindication, the inanity of extolled virtue, the lethargy of nescient matter, the apathy of the stars. In what final satisfaction did these antagonistic sentiments and reflections, reduced to their simplest forms, converge? Satisfaction at the ubiquity in eastern and western terrestrial hemispheres, in all habitable lands and islands explored or unexplored, the land of the midnight sun, the islands of the blessed, the islands of Greece, the land of promise, of adipose anterior and posterior female hemispheres, redolent of milk and honey, and of excretories sanguine and seminal warmth, reminiscent of secular families of curves of amplitude, insusceptible of moods of impressions, or of contrarieties of expression, expressive of mute, immutable, mature animality. The visible signs of antisatisfaction, an approximate erection, a solicitous adversion, a gradual elevation, a tentative revelation, a silent contemplation. Then he kissed the plump, mellow, yellow, smellow melons of her rump, on each plump, melanous hemisphere, in their mellow yellow furrow, with obscure, prolonged, provocative, melanous osculation. The signs of post-satisfaction: a silent contemplation, a tentative elation, a gradual abasement, a solicitous aversion, approximate erection. What followed this silent action? Somnolent invocation, less somnolent recognition, incipient excitation, and catechal interrogation. With what modifications did the narrator reply to this interrogation? Negative. He omitted to mention the clandestine correspondence between Martha Clifford and Henry Flower, the public altercation at, in, and in the vicinity of the licensed premises of Bernard Kiernan and Company, Limited, 8, 9, and 10 Little Britain Street, the erotic provocation and response thereto, caused by the exhibitionism of Gertrude Gertie, surname unknown. Positive. He included mention of a performance by Mrs. Banman Palmer of Leah at the Gaiety Theatre, 46, 47, 48, 49 South King Street, an invitation to supper at Wynn's, Murphy's Hotel, 35, 36, 37 Lower Abbey Street, a volume of Peccaminous pornographical tendency entitled Sweets of Sin. Anonymous author of A Gentleman of Fashion, a temporary concussion caused by a falsely calculated movement in the course of a post-scenal gymnastic display, the victim, since completely recovered, being Stephen Dedalus, professor and author, eldest surviving son of Simon Dedalus, of no fixed occupation, an aeronautical feat executed by him, narrator, in the presence of a witness, the professor and author aforesaid, with promptitude of decision and gymnastic flexibility. Was the narration otherwise unaltered by modification? Absolutely. Which event or person emerged as the salient point of his narration? Stephen Dedalus, professor and author. What limitations of activity and inhibitions of conjugal rights were perceived by listener and narrator concerning themselves during the course of this intermittent and increasingly more laconic narration? By the listener, a limitation of fertility, inasmuch as marriage had been celebrated 1 calendar month after the 18th anniversary of her birth, 8 September 1870, viz. 8 October, and consummated on the same date with female issue born 15 June 1889, having been anticipatorily consummated on the 10 September of the same year, and complete carnal intercourse with ejaculation of semen within the female organ having last taken place 5 weeks previous, viz. 27 November 1893, to the birth on 29 December 1893 of second and only male issue, deceased 9 January 1894, aged 11 days, there remained a period of 10 years, 5 months, and 18 days, during which carnal intercourse had been incomplete, without ejaculation of semen within the natural female organ. By the narrator, a limitation of activity, mental and corporal, inasmuch as complete mental intercourse between himself and the listener had not taken place since the consummation of puberty, indicated by the catamenic hemorrhage of the female issue of narrator and listener, 15 September 1903. There remained a period of 9 months and 1 day, during which, in consequence of a pre-established natural comprehension and incomprehension between the consummated females, listener and issue, complete corporal liberty of action had been circumscribed. How? By various reiterated female interrogation concerning the masculine destination, whither, the place where, the time at which, the duration for which, the object with which, in case of temporary absences, projected or effected. What moved visibly above the listener's and the narrator's invisible thoughts? The upcast reflection of a lamp and shade, an inconstant series of concentric circles of varying gradations of light and shadow. In what directions did listener and narrator lie? Listener, southeast by east, narrator, northwest by west, on the 53rd parallel of latitude north and 6th meridian of longitude west, at an angle of 45 degrees to the terrestrial equator. In what state of rest or motion? At rest relatively to themselves and to each other, in motion being each and both carried westward, forward, and rearward, respectively, by the proper perpetual motion of the earth, through ever-changing tracts of never-changing space. In what posture? Listener, reclined semi-laterally, left hand under head, right leg extended in a straight line and resting on left leg flexed, in the attitude of Jaya Tellus, fulfilled, recumbent, big with seed. Narrator, reclined laterally, left, with right and left legs flexed, the index, forefinger, and thumb of the right hand resting on the bridge of nose, in the attitude depicted in a snapshot photograph made by Percy Apjohn, the childman weary, the man-child in the womb. Womb? Weary. He rests. He has travelled. With Sinbad the sailor, and Tinbad the tailor, and Jinbad the jailer, and Winbad the whaler, and Ninbad the nailer, and Finbad the failer, and Binbad the bailer, and Pinbad the paler, and Minbad the mailer, and Hinbad the hailer, and Rinbad the railer, and Dinbad the caler, and Vinbad the quailer, and Linbad the yailer, and Zinbad the fithaler. When? Going to dark bed, there was a square round Sinbad the sailor rock's ox egg, in the night of the bed of all the ox of the rocks of dark and bad the bright dailer. Where?